It's like, he's drunk, he's barricaded himself in the house, he's got his wife as a hostage, and he's got a gun. I was like, all right, you got him on the phone? He said, yeah, we do. And the tactical team hadn't even arrived. I said, all right, let me talk to him. So we start talking, and I just had a feeling. Usually it's long into the conversation before you start talking about solutions to this, But I just had a feeling, and I said to him, what would it take for you to let your wife go and you come out peacefully? And Drew, there was this long pause, and he says, give me a beer. And I said, if I gave you a beer, do I have your word that you would let your wife go? He said, do I have your word I can drink it? I said, you absolutely have my word you can drink it, but will you let your wife go and will you come out peacefully? Yeah, give me a beer. So I gave $5 from one of the uniformed guys. I said, go down to the convenience store, buy a beer. The tactical team put it on the front porch. I call him back. I'm like, hey, your beer's on the front porch, but you don't get it until your wife comes out. All of a sudden, the front door comes open. Here comes his wife. Here he comes with his hands up. We handcuff him, let him drink his beer, and off to jail he went.
Welcome into the Fit for Radio podcast. I'm your host, Drew Tiedemann, and per usual, we're here at the Stafford Hills Club, one of my favorite places to go relax, to work out, to sit by the pool, to have a burger, you could name it. Anything you name when it comes to summer fun, they've got you covered here. Some of the greatest classes, that saltwater pool will keep that chlorine from buggering up your skin. And of course, it's a sense of community and family here. You want to get in where you fit in. The Stafford Hills Club. Tell them Drew sent you for half off your initiation. More details at staffordhills.com. Ready to get right into it. Today's guest is an amazing man living an extraordinary life, growing up in Chicago, playing college basketball, law enforcement, and a career that took some unexpected turns along the way. But Terry Tucker experienced more than most people do in a lifetime. Along the way, he did face some challenges that gave him some perspective on resilience and so much more. And he took those experiences to write books to help others to overcome the odds and figure it out themselves. But I won't tell you the whole story right here. We'll let it go from the man's mouth himself. Welcome to the show, Terry Tucker.
Drew, thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
Oh, it's great to have you here. And just looking at your life, somebody who has not lived a life like yours would just read the stats and maybe be exhausted. There's all kinds of stuff that's happened here. You grew up in Chicago, the oldest of three boys before you got into all the other things that we teased there. What was life like for you growing up in Chicago with two younger brothers?
I mean, it was great. I'm 6'8" tall. I've got a brother who's 6'7", another brother who's 6'6", and my dad was 6'5". So we always used to joke that if you sat behind our family in church growing up, not a prayer's chance you were going to see anything, at the front of the church. But our 5'8" mother was the boss. It didn't matter how big, tall, strong we were. Whatever mom said, that's the way it went. And my mother's almost 91, still with us and still pretty much telling us what to do at that. But it was great. I mean, we were all jocks. I mean, we all played college athletics. One brother was Division II All-American who was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the NBA. And my youngest brother was a pitcher for the University of Notre Dame's baseball team. So it was a blast. But our whole family revolved around sports. And my parents used to do what I call divide and conquer parenting. I'd have a game on Thursday night at 5 o'clock at this location, and my brother would have a practice on Thursday night at 5 o'clock at that location. So, dad's going with me, mom's going with my brother, and our family it was great. It was the best time in the world growing up with my brothers and my mom and dad.
That's unbelievable. I mean, I grew up as 3 out of 4 boys as well, so it was quite an army like you guys were. But at the size of you guys, you must have been eating them out of house and home growing up.
Yeah, I mean, my parents bought a second refrigerator to put it in the garage because, we need milk. And we were a meat and potatoes kind of family, kind of growing up in the Midwest. It was beef and steak and all that kind of stuff. But it was just fuel for all the events, all the athletics that we were involved in. We were constantly raiding the refrigerator.
That's pretty cool. Now, you we're all athletes. Now, I would guess that you probably played multiple sports when you were younger, because as the biggest kid in the room, it's a no-brainer. Now, you actually, beyond high school, you mentioned already that one of your brothers got drafted into the NBA, but you were no slouch of a basketball player yourself and went on to play at the college level, correct?
I did. Yeah, I was very fortunate, very lucky. I had 3 knee surgeries in high school, and the first 2 were pre-arthroscopic. Arthroscopic surgery wasn't available then. So, I have the large zipper scar on the outside of my knee, but I was lucky enough to fight back, to come back through all that, and to play Division I basketball, small school in Charleston, South Carolina called the Citadel, which was a blast.
So you actually have kind of a fun fact associated to your college basketball career, because people who love basketball know lots of players. People who know basketball know some players. Everybody knows a certain player, and that certain player would be Michael Jordan. Everyone knows who he is. You actually got a chance to play against Michael Jordan. Is that correct?
Yeah, so my senior year at the Citadel, there was a tournament. It was called the North-South Doubleheader, and they took 2 teams from North Carolina, which happened to be North Carolina and North Carolina State, and 2 teams from South Carolina, which happened to be my little school, the Citadel, and Furman University, and we played at the Charlotte Coliseum. And because Furman and Citadel were in the same conference, and North Carolina State were in the same conference, it was a round robin. So Friday night, we play North Carolina, and it's Michael Jordan's freshman year. So he was not the Michael Jordan that we all came to know and love. James Worthy was the big gun on the team.
Yeah,
and
he was.
North Carolina would go on that year. This was 1982. God, I'm really dating myself here, Drew. But in 1982, North Carolina would go on and win the national championship that year. And then Saturday night, we're playing Jim Valvano and North Carolina State, which the following year in 1983, they would go on and win the national championship. So unbeknownst to us, just on a typical weekend in February, we got to play against 2 national championship teams. And maybe I'm getting ahead of it, but I'm going to tell the story anyway. So my youngest brother, who pitched for Notre Dame, still is a basketball coach in the Chicago area. And he coached Michael Jordan's 2 sons.
Okay.
And he tells the story. He said, one day I'm at practice, and he said, I'm teaching kids a drill, and I look up and nobody's paying attention to anything I'm saying. So I look where they're looking, and it was over at the door. And Jordan had come into the gym as a dad. I'm here to pick up my kids and take them home after practice. And so my brother looked at him and said, hey, Michael, you're a little bit of a distraction. Would you mind waiting out in the hall until practice is over? And Jordan and his wife were incredibly gracious people. I said, sure, Coach, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. He goes out in the hall. And later my brother's like, geez, I'm probably the only coach in the history of basketball who ever kicked Michael Jordan out of practice. So yeah. It was just a great opportunity for him.
Yeah, nobody tells Jordan to leave the gym. Now you end up finishing, and that's a great story to be able to have that chance to play against Michael. And even the Jimmy Valvano thing, for people, the young bloods out there, Jimmy V, the North Carolina State coach, he's the one that to this day you see the Jimmy V Foundation and all the great work that they do. But back in the day, it's some of the best sound clips of a coach and his drive and desire. When you played against Jimmy, was he as animated on the sideline there as he was with the media?
He actually was. He was a pretty, he's Italian, and so, or he was Italian. He's passed away, unfortunately. So he's always talking with his hands, always moving, always, And I mean, it's funny in 1983 when North Carolina State wins the national championship, and it's kind of a last-second shot. It's a putback shot. He's running around the court looking for somebody to hug, and there's nobody hugging him. So he's a very animated guy. It's kind of interesting. My coach at the Citadel, Les Robinson, eventually leaves the Citadel, goes to East Tennessee State, becomes their basketball coach and athletic director, then goes to North Carolina State. Les was an NC State graduate, and so when Valvano kind of got in a little trouble at the end and they removed him, Les got the NC State job and the athletic director at NC State. And at the end of his career, he came back and became the athletic director at the Citadel. So I believe he's the only coach that was the coach and athletic director at 3 NCAA Division I schools.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So when you get done with school, you were good enough to play college basketball, but it is the difference between high school to college to pro. They're massive leaps.
Yeah.
It's a whole different level. You get to the NBA and Jordan and Worthy, there's a bunch of guys like that. And now, granted, those are big names that go down in history, but you really have to play at another level at that point, even at your height. So you get done with school and it's time for basically the next phase of your life. And so you end up moving home to Columbus, Ohio?
Yeah, my parents had moved to Columbus. My grandmother died, my dad's mom, my junior year, right? Spring break of my junior year. And so my dad got an opportunity to go back to Columbus. We had lived in Columbus for a short period of time when I was younger, but Chicago's always been home. So yeah, they moved, and yeah, now I'm graduated, and Drew, this is long before the internet's available to help people find employment. So it's like, I got to find a job now. I've got to do something. And I wanted to be in the Secret Service.
Okay.
So there's kind of a backstory. You look at my resume, it looks like a Super Bowl went off in the room. But I kind of wanted to follow in the footsteps of my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, my dad's dad, who was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. And in 1933, he was shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle. But my dad was an infant at the time, and always remembered the stories growing up that my grandmother told of that knock on the door of, Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us, your husband's been shot.
Yeah.
So when I expressed an interest in going into law enforcement, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to go to college, you're going to major in business, you're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. That's what my dad wanted me to do. Drew, that's not what I wanted to do.
And that's tough. That's tough because just as a parent myself, I always fear that I'm going to become a cop, or because of just as a parent, the selfish part of you is like, I need to preserve them. That's dangerous. I don't want to lose you.
Yes. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. And I mean, my dad, living in Columbus, my dad knew the police chief. He knew the sheriff. He knew the director of the Secret Service at the Columbus office. And he set me up an interview, and I didn't find out till years later. I was never going to get the job. It was, here, just interview my kid so he could say that and give him some excuse. Oh, you don't have a master's degree. Go get a master's degree. And Drew, I remember that interview. I sat in the federal building in a 3-piece suit with no air conditioning and sweated through my T-shirt, my dress shirt, my vest, and I'm like, I'm giving it everything I got in this interview. And it was all predetermined that it was never going to go anywhere. And so, my dad didn't want me to do that, but he was also dying when I got out of college. So I had a choice. I'd probably my first big adult choice. I could have said, Dad, I'm sorry. I know you're dying, but I'm going to go blaze my trail, do my own thing. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. So my first 2 jobs out of college were business related, and I did what every good son did. I waited till my father passed away, and then I followed my own dreams.
So what was your dad fighting at that point when you say he was dying?
So my dad had end-stage breast cancer, and was he was of a generation, and this is an excuse more than it is anything. He was of a generation never went to the doctor. I never remember my father getting sick enough to go to the doctor when we were growing up at all. And he knew he was sick for months. He would not go to the doctor. You talk about how big my brothers and I are. We got to a point where it was like, Dad, there's something wrong here. We don't know what it is. You're going to the, I'm not going. It's like, yeah, Dad, you're going. Because if you don't go on your own, the 3 of us are going to physically put you in the car and take you to the doctor. So man up here and do what you need to do. But by the time he was diagnosed, he was dead. And unfortunately, my grandmother, who was living with us, in the very next room, she was also dying. She had lymphoma. And so,
Oh, man.
my mom is losing her mother and her husband at the same time. And I mean, it was bad for us, but I can't imagine how horrible that thing was for my mother.
How did she cope with that? Did you see a lot of that pain on her? Did she push it down? I mean, that generation tends to try to protect others by hiding their own pain. What did you see in her at that time?
Yeah, I'm sure, in her own moments, in her private time, she cried, but, she took care of her mother-in-law when she was dying. She took her to chemotherapy. She took her to doctors. My dad went to work. So my mom was used to caring for people, but I think back on that time and, to know that, in two rooms side by side in our house, she was losing her mother and her husband. I mean, they died within 18 months of each other.
Oh, goodness.
And so it was, we're at the cemetery and then 18 months later, we're back again at the cemetery, and it's like, she is a strong woman. And I was glad, I ended up living at home for the next 3.5 years to be able to help them, because I would help her. I would get my dad ready for work and things like that. And it was, I would, my parents did so much for my brothers and I. It was, the least I could do to be there to help them, in their final years of life.
Absolutely. And it's commendable of you. So many people are like, well, it's my life. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And I come from a tight-knit family like you do. And it's just there comes a point where they made me, they raised me, they would have done it for me. And so I'm doing it for them.
Yeah.
And the nice thing is that's something that you can always hang your hat on. If you had run away and chased your dreams and it had happened without you there, you would likely kick yourself now for it.
I would. And honestly, Drew, that's one of the things I'm most proud of in my life is I never let my dream die, but I did what I needed to do in terms of this is my responsibility now. I need to step up and help my mom, help my dad, help my grandmother. The dream will wait. And it did. I mean, it waited till I was 37 years old, but it was, this needs to be done now. And if it would have taken 30 years for them to die, I would have been there for 30 years because like you say, you come from a family where your parents teach you the values of the importance of family, and my brothers and I are still, even to this day, very tight. We're all in our 60s now. And, we talk all the time on the phone. We talk about sports and stuff like that. And they're both in Chicago. I'm in Denver now. And it's that connection. I mean, our parents showed us the value of family. And hopefully we've passed that on to our family as well.
So at one point, your career has to start taking shape, right? And so give me a little bit of insight into the timeline because you move home for the 3.5 years and you're spending that taking care of your family. And at some point you get a job at Wendy's International, but then also you mentioned that at some point you end up in the hospital administration business. Walk me through the timeline of how that looks.
Sure. So I graduated from college in May of 1982. It took me about 6 months to actually find a job. And I was the field marketing trainee at the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, which was great. It was a tremendous job. I learned a great deal about living, being in corporate America. And it was kind of the heyday of Wendy's at that time. I'm probably going to date myself again. There was a huge commercial around that time called Where's the Beef?
Oh, I know that commercial. That's a classic. Yeah.
Yeah. Classic. I mean, it's one of the Clios are what advertisers get when, it's kind of like the Academy Awards for companies and stuff. I don't know how many Clios we won I had nothing to do with the Where's the Beef, but I was there during that time. And it was almost magical. It was so cool to see this. And when Ronald Reagan was running for president, he quoted that, where's the beef flying and things like that. So it was amazing being there. And so I'd get up in the morning, I'd empty my dad's urinal, I'd take a shower, shave, get dressed and go to work. And then at noon, I would leave my job, go home, help my mom finish dressing my dad, put him in the car, take him to work, get him in his office, and then go back to my work. And then at 5 o'clock, I'd go get him and bring him home, and we'd undress them, get them back into bed. And so that was, it was, you did what you had to do. And the hospital part of it was, I thought Riverside Methodist Hospital did such a great job caring for my father and my grandmother that I wanted to be part of that. And they had an opportunity for a new program development manager position. And so I left Wendy's and went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother.
That's impressive. I mean, just the sequence of what you're doing during that time at Wendy's. And I just have to say, in passing, as we move forward, those commercials, the Dave Thomas and the Where's the Beef and all the stuff about Wendy. I was born in 81 when you're playing against Jordan. So during your time there, that's kind of like the early days of me seeing television commercials. And it really sold it. It made me want to have a square pattied hamburger.
Yeah. It was so funny. They also did a commercial with Dick Butkus, the former
the old football player.
Yeah. And it was so funny because I know nothing about, advertising and, contracts and getting people to do commercials and things like that. So Butkus does this commercial, but apparently in the contract, he doesn't get to keep the clothing that he uses so I'm the only person, at corporate headquarters that can wear Butkus' shirt that he wore in the commercial. So like, here, Terry, here's Butkus' shirt. I'm like, great, thanks. I
would have been so excited about that.
It was just a dress shirt, but it was okay, fine.
But as a sports fan, you're like, I'm going to go ahead and hold on to this. This episode brought to you by Motorsport Hillsboro, your one-stop shop for everything when it comes to dirt bikes, street bikes, side-by-sides, e-assist, mountain bikes, and so much more. Save thousands right now on a gas e-bike. These things are epic. These electric mountain bikes are pedal assist, but they'll take you longer, farther, and higher than you've ever gone. I mean, some of the things that you see people do on these, they'll take you down a trail that you would have been gassed long ago. And of course, the easiest and best financing for you right there at Motorsport Hillsboro, where they make sure to get the job done for you and to do in a way that you leave feeling good so you can hit the trails and let that wind burn through your hair and maybe catch a little dirt in your teeth while you're at it. Motorsporthillsboro.com. Also brought to you by Axiom Plumbing, Sewer, and Septic. Everything water and waste, they'll take care of you. And of course, my buddy Bruce is born and raised in the Portland area, not private equity. He takes care of his people too. Tell him Drew sent you for 10% off your first purchase, and also $500 off a water heater if you need one of those. And as we head into the fall months, it's going to be needed for you to get on board and maybe stay warm in the shower, unless you're ready for a cold plunge every single time you get in there. So hit them up today, AxiomPDX.com. And, of course, the Stafford Hills Club. These are my people, voted the #1 health and wellness facility in the Portland area, and you've got to come down and see them. They got everything you need, from workout facilities to the saltwater pool, and classes with the best instructors. And just the community here is next level. I talk about it all the time, but I truly love it. And they care about the people who walk in this door. If you want to be a part of it, StaffordHills.com. Tell them Drew sent you for half off your initiation. And for so many people, if they, at this point in your story, like a lot of people have already completed their list of what they're going to do. You worked in a hospital, you worked at Wendy's, you helped to take care of your dad and your grandmother, you played college basketball against Michael Jordan. I mean, the list goes on, but that's just the beginning, because so many people would consider when you get into your mid-30s that this is just kind of it, that this is time for you to be like, okay, well, that's my life, and I'm just going to follow through till it's over. But you still had a calling, an itch, if you will, to do something else and to follow your dreams, which are beyond being a low-level administrator at a hospital, correct?
Correct.
So at 37, Terry, what do you decide to do?
Yeah, so, I'm married at this time, and my wife and I are living in Santa Barbara, California, and I get it. There's a circular in the mail. And Drew, I never read those things. They went immediately into the recycling, but I just happened to be paging through it at lunch, and it was from Santa Barbara City College. And it was a class that if you took the class, you could be a reserve police officer in any jurisdiction in the state of California. And so you can imagine that conversation, with my wife at dinner that night. She'd married me, suit and tie kind of guy. And it's like, honey, what do you think? Would you support me in doing this? And she's like, yeah, take the class, see what happens. So I took the class and I got on with Santa Barbara PD as a reserve officer. And my wife tells the story much better than I do. So I would work all week at my regular job. And then I would Friday night come home, put on my uniform, go to roll call and work all night. And then come home Saturday morning. She said, you'd come home exhausted, but with this big grin on your face, this big smile on your face. And so when our daughter was born in 1996, we moved to Cincinnati. And I looked at her and I'm like, I got to go all in on this. I can't just do this on the weekends. I want to do it full time. Will you support me? And I know she was like, you got to be kidding me. But she did. And so I spent the first year going through the process of getting hired at CPD. And honestly, Drew, it was great because it was the first year of our daughter's life. So I was the stay-at-home dad. My wife went to work, and I would periodically have to go for meetings or appointments and things like that. But it was, I was moving towards something I wanted to do in my life that I felt was my purpose, my passion. And I also got to spend the first year of my life with our daughter, which, it was the greatest year of my life.
It's so funny you say that because, I've only ever been out of work for very short periods of my life, but both times are when I had super young children. And, in the moment you're like, oh my God, why am I not at work? Why am I at home? And now I look back on those times as just sacred ground, I could never be there for every special little moment if I was at work. And so, granted, work's important, but not as important as those moments. And so for you to be able to do that and to be there for that is incredible. Was your wife, she was so supportive. Was she, as someone who loves and cares about you, was there a concern for your safety?
I think so. I can't tell you how many police funerals I went to, people that I knew and things like that had died in the line of duty. And, you come home and a lot of the things I would sort of give her the highbrow. It's like, here's what happened. I'm not going to get out in the weeds with you because you don't want to know that and you don't need to know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think she was. And I worked the night shift, and so
danger zone.
Go to bed. And, 11 o'clock, I'm on duty, 11 o'clock till 7 in the morning. And I loved working nights. I'll tell you a quick story. I would never leave the house without my daughter giving me a hug, kiss, and careful daddy. Even if they were traveling, she was on vacation seeing her mom or with our daughter, I got to have that on. It was like putting on a suit and that. But yeah, family was... I loved what I was doing, but family was important. And we always made the conscious decision that family was going to come first. And I'll admit this now. There are days, Drew, I'd work all night. My daughter would have it was daddy's day at school. I would go there. I'd maybe go get 2 or 3 hours of sleep and then have to go back to work. And I'm carrying a gun and having to make, decisions that might affect somebody's life. But family was more important than the job. I was a dad. Yes, I was a police officer, but I was a dad and I was a husband first.
So you start off as a patrol officer, but you end up doing some of the more intense things. In your notes, you talked about working as undercover narcotics, a SWAT hostage negotiator. These are the intense things. These are like the 90s movies that we were watching. I bet you encountered some wild stuff during that time.
Yeah, you're sort of a product of your environment. And my training officer, you go through an FTO program, field training officer. My training officer had just come out of the drug unit. And so, when he was back in the car and I was with him, we were doing stops all the time. We were getting dope. We were getting guns. We were getting money, all that kind of stuff. And so I learned how to do that. And it was fun. It was kind of pathetic in a lot of ways because people do ridiculous things when they're addicted.
It's easier to catch them in those modes when you're not twisted and they are.
Yeah. Yeah, you felt sorry for a lot of people and things like that. But I was interested in that, and the two best assignments in the police department, in Cincinnati Police Department at that time, were homicide and the street corner unit, which was the undercover drug unit. And to get into one of those, I mean, I was in a district like, you'll never get into that. Don't even apply. And I'm like, well, what's it hurt to apply? And I got in, and so I was very lucky. But I loved that. And then, the whole negotiator part, getting on SWAT and doing that was also, I mean, part of it was just, especially SWAT, it's usually the best people with the best training and the best equipment. And I think you can tell from my story, my life story, I've always wanted to be part of the best. And so I wanted to go for things that maybe were a stretch, but things where I could learn and hopefully contribute to the group and to the community where I was serving.
And, it's a good lane for you. And I'm just this is a broad assumption, but I'm guessing at your height, that you weren't necessarily going undercover all the time.
It's you're right. Yes, that's true. I mean, I never changed my appearance. I never grew a beard. I never grew my hair long. I never did anything like that, because what motivates the illicit drug industry, and it is an industry, is greed. If you've got $20, you can find somebody to sell you, a rock of crack or weed or whatever it was, but you had to act. I mean, I was working the day shift, and my partner, when we were on patrol, ended up coming to the unit as well. She was working the day shift. I was working the night shift, and she called me. She said, "Hey, will you buy from these kids?" I'm like, "What's the deal?" She's like, "Well, there's kids from Dayton. They want to come down to Cincinnati. They want to sell psilocybin, which is mushrooms.
Yeah,
and they want to use the money and party in Cincinnati tonight. Will you buy from them?" I'm like, "Sure." I said, "But we need a cover story. We need a backstory. What am I doing?" And that. So, Drew, I posed as a professor of metallurgy from the University of Cincinnati. The only thing I know about metal is like you put it out in the rain, it rusts. That's my extent of knowledge, of metal.
Yeah.
But I met these kids in a park, had a briefcase and all that kind of stuff, and bought from them, and then we arrested them. And so instead of partying in Cincinnati, they were guests of the Hamilton County Jail that night.
I bet they were. Now, when you became a SWAT officer and hostage negotiator, that really interests me, because I feel like I would be good in that role of the person who is addressing the person who's in distress and trying to connect with them, and and obviously you have to manipulate them as well, but also to kind of connect on a level that makes them trust you. And I feel like some of the other things about you play into that. And I'm not putting words in your mouth, and I want to hear from you, but like being a father, having the compassions that you did, taking care of your own family, being raised in a solid home allows you to kind of be grounded and believable when you talk to people. Tell me about that. And then if there is a moment where, or an example of a time you had to negotiate out.
Sure. So you're absolutely right. I mean, let's face it. If you're talking to me and your house is surrounded by the police, you're probably having the worst day of your life. I mean, That's not something that usually occurs to most people. And so you're trying to connect with people on a level that, you've got to get down in the weeds with these people and that. And so, we don't start out with, "Hi, I'm Officer Tucker. I'm Sergeant Tucker." No, it's, "Hi, I'm Terry. What's your name?" "Oh, you don't need to know my name." "Okay, what do you want me to call you?" "Call me Bob." "Okay, Bob, help me to understand what's going on here." Because a lot of times, Drew, we would be on scene and like, I have no idea what precipitated this person grabbing a gun and barricading themselves in a room or something like that.
You just know the circumstance.
Yeah, it's like there's a guy, he's barricaded in a room, he's shooting outside. "Oh, okay, what do we don't know anything." So, you're really starting from ground zero, because I don't know this person and they don't know me. And so understanding, and the important word there is understand. Help me to understand what's going on. If this was a 3-time homicide suspect, I wasn't going to be like, "Oh yeah, I totally agree that you should have murdered those people." But
that wouldn't work.
No, doesn't work at all. But understanding leads to trust, and trust leads to a point where hopefully, you can get the person out safely. But at the end of the day, it's really their decision on how this is going to work. So we would do that we would use how and what questions. We would stay away from why questions, because think about when you were growing up, when I was growing up. You would do something stupid and your parents are like, why did you do that? Oh, yeah, I don't like, I mean, I could say, hey, Drew, why did you wear that shirt today? He'd be like, oh, well, wait a minute, does Terry not like the shirt I'm wearing? I can get to the same answer by saying, hey, Drew, what made you decide to wear that shirt today? It's a softer question. It lands differently with a person.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. And, I mean, we were taught to be curious. We were taught to use silence because people don't like silence. Be quiet. People want to talk.
Yeah. And even me as a talker, I'm like, I'd just be spilling my guts. I'd be telling you, I'm a Gemini. I was born on this day. And all the things would be coming out. Do you have a moment in that negotiation? Did you ever have to do a high intensity one that sticks with you?
I do. I'll give you that one. Then I'll give you another one that's really short but kind of funny. So yeah, I was negotiating. This was an individual who wanted to commit suicide, and so he'd started probably around dinner time, and he'd slit his wrists, and that didn't work. And then he thought it was a good idea to turn the gas on his stove and stick his head in the oven, and that didn't work at all either. Mm-hmm. And so he ended up calling a family member, and it's probably 1 o'clock in the morning now, and the family member called the police, and so we're talking to him. He's got a gun now. And so I had been talking with him for hours, and I finally got to a point with him. Honestly, Drew, I think he was just exhausted. I mean, I bet. And he was like, Terry, I just want to come out. I said, yeah, come on out. And I said, and I'll come down to the scene and we'll sit and we'll talk man to man. Yeah, I'd really like that. I'd really like that. I said, okay, put the gun down, but take the phone with you and do what the officer, and I told him what was going to happen when he got outside and stuff like that. Well, he hung the phone up, which isn't uncommon. We're kind of conditioned that when a conversation's over, we hang the phone up. But 15 seconds later, one of the tactical guys comes on the radio and says, we heard a gunshot. And I thought, you didn't. He did. Shot himself in the head. But he shot himself in such a way, and we think it was, I really don't want, it wasn't like this. It was, I really don't want to do this. Bang, gun goes off, bullet goes in right here by his temple, travels around his skull, underneath his skin, and comes out the other side.
Around the horn.
Around the horn. Very bloody, but in terms of seriousness, not a very serious wound at all, which kind of goes to show, when it's your time to go, it's your time. But the converse of that is true as well. When it's not your time, there's nothing you can do that's going to make it your time. So that was a pretty high stakes one. And I mean,
you're lucky it came out the way it did too, because I mean, you did the right things, but when somebody's having a mental health crisis, you do what you can and you hope for the best.
Yes. The funny one is, I mean, sometimes you got to laugh or you'll cry. This was, I happened to be working that night. And so I get to the scene, and I was in a marked car, get my gear on, I'm talking to the uniform officers, like, what's the deal? It's like, he's drunk. He's barricaded himself in the house. He's got his wife as a hostage, and he's got a gun. I was like, all right, you got him on the phone? He said, yeah, we do. And the tactical team hadn't even arrived. I said, all right, let me talk to him. So we start talking. And I just had a feeling, usually it's long into the conversation before you start talking about solutions to this, but I just had a feeling. And I said to him, what would it take for you to let your wife go and you come out peacefully? And Drew, there was this long pause, and he says, give me a beer. And I said, if I gave you a beer, do I have your word that you would let your wife go? He said, do I have your word I can drink it? I said, you absolutely have my word you can drink it, but will you let your wife go and will you come out peacefully? Yeah, give me a beer. So I gave $5 to one of the uniformed guys. I said, go down to the convenience store, buy a beer. The tactical team put it on the front porch. I call him back. I'm like, hey, your beer's on the front porch, but you don't get it until your wife comes out. All of a sudden, the front door comes open. Here comes his wife. Here he comes with his hands up. We handcuff him, let him drink his beer, and off to jail he went.
So did somebody hold the beer to his mouth then? Or they let him
handcuff? Yeah. We just let him drink his beer, which that's what he wanted.
And you fulfilled the promise there, right?
And that's it. It's trust. If I'm going to lie to you, because we used to tell people, if you ever think I'm lying to you, I want you to stop the conversation and call me out on it. Because we never lied to people. Never. We always told them the truth, even if that's something that they didn't want to hear.
Now, that's an incredible move right there. And, one cold beer for a safe lady, that's a nice trade, Terry. Now, when you join the police department at the age of 37 in the middle of the 90s, and then, you have a successful career there, what year do you leave the police department? Because you do deal with some adversity in 2012.
Yeah, I left in 2005 because, as we've talked about, my wife supported me in this. She lost her job in Cincinnati, and she's always been the primary breadwinner. So it was like, okay, now I need to support you. And we moved to Houston, Texas, and I got out of law enforcement because it was what was right for our family.
So in 2012, you were diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. And you were told a horrifying thing that you would be dead within 2 years. Run me through real quick what was the diagnosis and what was your feelings when you heard such a terrible thing?
Yeah, I had a callus break open on the bottom of my left foot, right below my third toe. And I was a basketball coach at the time. And so, you're on your feet a lot. So I didn't think much of it. But after
you're a big guy.
Yeah. Few weeks of it not healing, I went to see a podiatrist friend of mine, and he takes an x-ray and he says, Terry, I think you have a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And Drew, he does, cuts it out, shows it to me, a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it, no dark spots, no blood, nothing that gives either one of us concern. But he sends it off to pathology. And then 2 weeks later, I get the call. And like I said, he's a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he's having explaining to me what's going on, the more frightened I am becoming, until finally he just laid it out. I said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have an incredibly rare form of melanoma called acral lentiginous melanoma that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. And he said, because your cancer is so rare, you need to go to MD Anderson to be treated. I did. They excised the bottom of my foot, took out all the lymph nodes, and then looked at me and said, we got nothing. This is this rare form of cancer. You'll probably be dead in 2 years. The only thing we have for you is surgery. And I thought, well, okay. Gave me a death sentence. I got to figure out how I'm going to turn this death sentence into a life sentence. Yep. 14 years later, I'm still here.
So at what point do you find out that there's going to be an issue with your foot long term?
So 2018, so I was, like I said, they have nothing to offer me. So they put me on this drug called interferon, which they don't even use anymore. It's a horrible, nasty, debilitating drug. I had the flu every week for 5 years. Oh. And it was, as my doctor said, we're just kicking the can down the road. And so eventually I had to get off of it because I ended up in the intensive care unit because of the toxicity of the drug with a fever of 108 degrees, which is usually not compatible with being alive.
No.
So you can't take this drug anymore. And the cancer immediately came back on the bottom of my foot. And we still don't really have anything. So I had to have my foot amputated in 2018.
Was that a tough deal for you? Because, to me, the amputation is always so tough because it's so permanent. And, you being an athlete and a coach and all these things, did those things come flying through your mind? Or are you just in I need to survive because I've been in this for so long?
Yeah, initially they were going to do a below-the-knee amputation. And fortunately, my orthopedic surgeon had a good friend, another doctor who was a foot specialist, and they got together and were able to pretty much leave me my heel and my ankle. They took everything in front of it. I still had to learn how to walk again, how to balance and all that kind of stuff. But that was a whole lot better than what was initially proposed. So, you know what? I've been an athlete my whole life. What have I learned? You deal with adversity. You deal with things that you can't handle. You figure out a way to make it work for you. And so that's what my wife and I did.
Which is incredible. And you have this thing about you, Terry, where it's just you have a positivity that, okay, well, this is what we do now. And it goes all the way back to when you would care for your father, and you have a trait that I'm noticing is repetitive here. Well, you just take a deep breath sometimes and you just push on, because what's the other option? To sulk and to give in and to wave the flag. If you'd ever done that, you wouldn't be here having this conversation with me.
True. I mean, I love the quote from Winston Churchill, who was the prime minister of Great Britain during World War II. He said, if you're going through hell, keep going. And that's kind of, I think about that a lot. It's like, yeah, this is not going to be fun, but you know what? We just got to keep going. And so that's what I try to do.
I love it. And my dad's from England, so I know all about Winston Churchill. We got little mugs of him when I was a child all over the house, and pictures and paintings and the whole meal deal. This episode brought to you by Motorsport Hillsboro, your one-stop shop for everything when it comes to dirt bikes, street bikes, side-by-sides, e-assist, mountain bikes, and so much more. Save thousands right now on a gas e-bike. These things are epic. These electric mountain bikes are pedal assist, but they'll take you longer, farther, and higher than you've ever gone. I mean, some of the things that you see people do on these, they'll take you down a trail that you would have been gassed long ago. And of course, the easiest and best financing for you right there at Motorsport Hillsboro, where they make sure to get the job done for you and to do in a way that you leave feeling good so you can hit the trails and let that wind burn through your hair and maybe catch a little dirt in your teeth while you're at it. Motorsporthillsboro.com. Also brought to you by Axiom Plumbing, Sewer, and Septic. Everything water and waste, they'll take care of you. And of course, my buddy Bruce is born and raised in the Portland area, not private equity. He takes care of his people too. Tell him Drew sent you for 10% off your first purchase, and also $500 off a water heater if you need one of those. And as we head into the fall months, it's going to be needed for you to get on board and maybe stay warm in the shower, unless you're ready for a cold plunge every single time you get in there. So hit them up today, AxiomPDX.com. And, of course, the Stafford Hills Club. These are my people, voted the #1 health and wellness facility in the Portland area, and you've got to come down and see them. They got everything you need, from workout facilities to the saltwater pool, and classes with the best instructors. And just the community here is next level. I talk about it all the time, but I truly love it. And they care about the people who walk in this door. If you want to be a part of it, StaffordHills.com. Tell them Drew sent you for half off your initiation. And I got to give you credit, for being able to roll with the punches and, deal with all of the sickness that you dealt with, and then being okay with losing your foot. Well, the pandemic comes along, and that was annoying for everyone involved, but you got an extra curveball during this time, didn't you?
Yeah, unfortunately, I did. I had what doctors thought was a hematoma in the area where they had taken my foot, and were treating it as such. I was seeing an occupational therapist, and the occupational therapist was one that kind of sounded the alarms, like, you need to scan him. There's something, this isn't working. Something's going on. So they did an ultrasound, and they're like, we can't see anything in your lower leg. Literally, we can't see anything in your lower leg in an ultrasound. They should be able to see things. And then they did a scan and found out my entire lower leg was full of cancer, and I had these big tumors in my lungs. And so in the middle of COVID, it was like, we need to amputate your leg above the knee. And I'm like, no, no, I'm kind of partial in this.
Yeah.
And I fortunately had a great orthopedic doctor. Because of COVID, all elective surgeries were shut down. They weren't doing anything. They're like, just put a cast on it. And he was like, I got to back up. So the tumor, which they thought was a hematoma, ended up breaking my leg. It fractured my tibia. So the administration was like, no, you're not doing surgery. Just put a cast on it. It's like, it's not going to heal. This tumor has broken his leg. So we went to an outlying hospital, not the main hospital here in the University of Colorado system, but it was, you can't have anybody with you. So my wife drops me off at the hospital. We're in the car. She's like, what should I do? I'm like, I just park in the parking lot and wait for the doctor to call you. There's a nurse there, takes you back into a pre-op room. And anybody who's ever had surgery knows, a pre-op room, this big room with, probably 30 different curtains getting people ready for surgery. Drew, I was the only person in that pre-op room. Yeah. And I'm like, if I didn't have a broken leg, I would have run like heck out of there. It's like, I'm not doing this. And they said, you'll be in the hospital for 10 days to 2 weeks to learn how to function without having a leg. they sent me home after 48 hours because of the COVID. I mean, my pain wasn't even under control. It was
man,
just go home. And my wife and I weren't ready for that, but we figured it out. We figured out what needed to be done. And unfortunately, our house, the doors are not wide enough for a wheelchair. So I have to transition to a walker to get into the bedroom, the bathroom, and things like that. But you figure it out. And that's, I've said that so many times in my life. We'll figure it out. I don't know what the answer is, but we'll figure it out. And that should be on my tombstone, I think. So.
Yeah, which is amazing. Now, since they took it above the knee instead of below the knee, one of my good friends lost his leg in a motorcycle accident, and it's below the knee. And so it's a much different operation when it comes to your day-to-day. Mm-hmm. How were you able to adapt to life without the knee? And for you today, how does that work for your mobility?
Yeah, I list to port a lot, Sorry, that's a really bad joke. But, I have a prosthetic leg. I don't like it. I used it to walk our daughter down the aisle when she was married. But I'm much more comfortable in a wheelchair, with the prosthetic. I was never comfortable with where I was in space, balance and things like that. Being 6'8", falling is not an option. You get hurt from this height and stuff like that. So you just learn, you adapt. And so I was able to get a wheelchair that was specifically manufactured for my height, the length of my femurs and things like that. And you deal with it. And so, it's not an electric wheelchair. I push myself around. It kind of keeps me in shape and things like that. So you find a way to take something that's detrimental and use it to your advantage. And so, wheeling around keeps me in shape with the wheelchair.
So what do you do since you're an athlete by nature? I'm asking athletic questions. The leg that is still fully intact, do you do workouts in order to keep that thing going, or how does that work?
I do, and tell me God doesn't have a sense of humor. I mean, he cut off my good leg. He didn't cut off the leg that had the knee surgeries,
Oh, of course.
So yes, I have to exercise that leg to keep those muscles. But I use bands to do that and things like that. I do kind of modified push-ups like on counters and things like that. I do crunches, and I just do things to keep my body moving and things like that. And in the event I ever fall or something like that, I want to be able to get myself off the ground and stuff like that. And so I mean, think about that. What do? I get on the floor and figure out how to get off the floor. It's, you adapt, you figure it out.
That's awesome. And, aside from the adversity, there are some pretty amazing things as well. One thing the greatest thing about my life is being a dad. And being a girl dad. I'm a 3-time girl dad, which I'm surprised there isn't more gray hair up here quite yet. It's on the way. And I see that you were also a girl dad.
Yeah, I mean, my wife and I, and it was so funny. We go to the doctor, and it's like, do you want to know the sex? And I was like, yeah, sure. And it's like, okay, you should buy pink. I'm like, oh, no. You need to keep it in there till it's done. I have no idea how to raise a girl. But I mean, my daughter and I are probably closer than, my wife and my daughter. And that was sports. Our daughter played college basketball at the Air Force Academy. And
awesome.
I got to coach her in high school, and all those days in the gym, putting up shots. It wasn't the shots, Drew. It was the questions. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? It was the dialogue, the conversation that we had. Those mean more to me today than I don't care how many, shots she made or anything like that. It was the time we got to spend together. And you're a parent, I love my daughter to death, would do anything for her. I'm so proud of her. It's great.
And it's funny because you grew up in a similar household than mine. You're just a little taller. But you and your brothers, boys will be boys. And I always make this association because I grew up one of 4 boys, and my kids are all girls. And I always say, boys are more holes in walls and girls are more feelings. And so if you can embrace that, it's all going to be okay. And it's funny, I had a girl, and then we were pregnant with our 3rd kid, and people are like, you ready for your boy? I'm like, kind of just wanted to be another girl because they're so special, and dad and them have this relationship. And for me, you talk about putting up baskets and discussing the sport, but you're talking about life in between the lines. And my kids aren't going to be professional athletes. They know that. They're good at other things, but it's the drives to soccer practice. It's the hug after the game and the good job and where they know you're proud of them and all those things. I mean, it builds that relationship, and it's so much more important than the goals. I always say that my oldest daughter, she's the girl, even if she doesn't score a goal, her highlight will be the girl who got hurt and she goes to check on her. Now, I wish she waits till the whistle blows, but that's just who they are, and there's something special about that, and harnessing that and realizing that the actual stats are secondary to the experience.
They are. And it's my mom used to buy our daughter all these, frilly girly things. And my daughter was like, I want my Chuck Taylor high tops, my basketball shorts, and my Cubs jersey. That's what I want to wear, and it would drive my mother crazy. I want to buy these dresses. She doesn't want to wear dresses, Mom. She wants to do this and that. And, so it's amazing. And she's married now. And I mean, she's like 6'3" and her husband's like 5'8". She's tall and thin. Her husband's short and squatty. So I figure, when they start having kids, it'll be like linebackers and stuff like that. So,
That is so funny. Now, are you a grandfather yet, or is that still in the process?
No, as a matter of fact, our granddaughter is here with us. We almost 3 months old. We call her DOC, which stands for dose of cuteness. So we have to get our little dose of cuteness every day. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
And my youngest daughter is now 2.5, and time flies by. But there's just something special about that dose of cuteness. I'm taking that with me. That's an incredible name. Now, I'm so glad that you get to experience that too. And that just gives you, now you have just endless years of greatness with another kid and likely more. But you've also done some other things to help people and to kind of use your experience that other people can rest on. Now, you're a writer as well. You've written multiple books. Tell me a little bit about your writing.
I think everybody should have a writing practice. People say stuff to me. It's like, I never thought about that. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know what my opinions are on that. And I find a way to do that is to just start jotting stuff down. And so I've always done that. I've always written and things like that. I remember, was deciding where to go to college. My dad was like, let's take a piece of paper and, let's write pros and cons and things like that. So writing's always been something I've enjoyed. I don't know how good I am at, people say, well, you're a writer. I think, no, I'm just a guy that writes. I was a basketball player. I understood basketball. I was a student of the game. I don't think I'm as good a student of writing, but yes, I've written a couple books that, and you write what you know. And so I've been through 14 years of cancer. I've been through knee surgeries. I've been through college athletics. I've been on SWAT. I've done things in my life kind of at a high level that I've enjoyed. What did I learn from that? And how can I put that in a written form that other people can benefit? So I wrote Sustainable Excellence and Four Truths and a Lie. And it's been a great experience learning about something else. I didn't know anything about writing or publishing or anything like that. Something else to learn in my life.
So Four Truths and a Lie, that's your latest book, correct?
Yes.
Now, tell me a little bit about what that's all about.
Four Truths and a Lie are, so I was kind of a funny story. I was on a podcast. It was called My Three Truths. And I'm like, what are my three truths? What do I need to know? And so I spent some time and wrote them down, but there was always this kind of lingering, there's another one here. There's another one here. And as human beings, we like things in threes. And so I was like, I don't know if I want to add a fourth, but eventually I did. And I have them on a Post-it note here in my office, and I'll give them to you. They're one sentence each. So the first one is control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. The second one is embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life and use that pain and difficulty to make you stronger and more resilient. The third one, and this is the one I added because I felt it was so important, I look at it as kind of a legacy truth, is what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then the fourth one, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. As long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And so I've got stories, in the book about all those. Somebody once told me never make a point without telling a story and never tell a story without making a point. If I told you those four things and then went away, you might remember one of them. But if I told you the four truths and gave you a story, there's a better chance you would remember each of them. So,
oh yeah,
it's the storytelling of our lives that I think is so important.
I think that is so important. And as you walk through those things, I've dealt with plenty of adversity in my own life. And really how you always come through it is you keep chopping the wood. You just keep pushing on. And then you have to embrace the suck sometimes. And you have to let that be, they do the strongest steel goes through the strongest iron goes through the hottest flame. Like, of course, that's what we have to remember, because when the flame is hot, it feels unnerving and something that you can't overcome. And so I think that you've got a great message there. And I'm actually going to take some time and check your book out and actually give it a deep dive read, and maybe can help myself with some of those principles as well. For others who want to check out your stuff that you've written, where would be the best place for them to find it?
The books are available on Amazon, but you can also go to my website, which is motivationalcheck.com, and it has the link to Amazon for both of the books.
That's impressive. And it's so great that you took the time to sit down with me today, Terry, because your energy definitely gives me fuel to move on no matter what the circumstances, and one thing that I take away from your story and our conversation is you've lived an extraordinary life, but you haven't been handed all aces, right? You've taken the cards and you've been like, okay, well, I can put two pair together and that's a winning hand. Or I can, maybe just the high card sometimes is the winning hand. You can find a way to come out on top. And here you are now, enjoying the fruits of it, and you'll get to hang with your grandkids, and you'll get to teach them the lessons that you taught to your daughter, and it all just kind of rolls downhill like that. And so my hat goes off to you, even though I'm rarely not wearing one now. I just got a fresh haircut. That you have this demeanor about you, and it's contagious. And I hope that people take the time to read your books and to go to your website and say it one more time for the people.
Motivationalcheck.com.
And check out what Terry's been up to, and use his story as motivation for yourself, that you can overcome the odds, you can do great things. It doesn't always have to be handed to you. You stay positive and great things will happen. Thank you so much, Terry. I really do appreciate you taking the time coming on here today, and I feel like I'm better for it.
Well, Drew, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed our conversation.
And we'll talk soon. I'll be keeping up with you.
Thank you.
Cheers. That was great.